Hey everyone, it's me, Scott from Heroic Exodus Gaming, talking to you today. It is pretty midday-ish on one of my days off, trying to record this for you for this upcoming week. So it's a little early, but I figured, I made it a few days early, but I figured I'd make it while I had time rather than make it later on. So because I try to put them out, especially if I'm gonna do an update video, I try to make it the day of or on the next day, because it's hard to put them out on time. Anyway, that's not important. Let's talk about what is important today. Today is a book corner spotlight. We're going to be talking about Dune, the book by Frank Herbert that was published in 1965, and basically when my dad was 3 years old. That's how old this book is, and I decided not to read it until I was 26, I think. 10 years ago. So I read it again just last, basically when the Dune RPG was sort of coming out by Modifius. I decided to go back and reread it because I felt I was man, this, I don't know, this art's cool, but I felt like this book was terrible. So I went back and reread it, and my feelings on the book actually increased. So let's talk about it a little bit, because I'm actually a little bit more into the book than I was before, but I'm still not super into the book. So the deal is, if you haven't heard of Frank Herbert's Dune, then I don't know. Honestly, you would, I've said this before, if you don't know about this thing, you must be living under a rock. I mean, in this case, you honestly have to have lived under a rock. This book has been out since 1965. It has been out for, 50 years now, almost. So 40, 45, no, 50, yeah, 50, almost 60 years now. So it's been out for a long, long time. And so anyone who is basically over the age of, 60-ish may have not heard of this book because they were young when it came out or something. I don't know. Everyone else should know that this book exists, because it has existed. There have been movies made. In fact, I think the movie was made in 1984 or something. Yeah, it was. I've totally made a thing. Anyway, so this book was created by Frank Herbert, and it was it was sort of this exploration of a fantasy universe that he had created that was science fiction-y, that was space rather than fantasy. And that was what it was. And in fact, the thing about this book is that it is essentially the inspiration for a lot of other space stuff. Last month I just covered Warhammer 40K, and honestly, a lot of the stuff in Warhammer 40K sort of comes from this book. There's a lot of the world building stuff that came from this book, and Games Workshop has confessed as much, that they sort of ripped off some of the stuff from here. But they said they did it in a loving way, the book inspired their stuff, not that they stole it. Which is a very polite way for a company to say that they stole the ideas from something else. But essentially, they couldn't make the Dune space game, but it's all fair. Anyway, this all takes place on the planet Arrakis, which is a planet in the Imperium that produces spice melange, which is the most important thing in the universe. It is essentially this space epic version of oil. Right, that was the thing I got out of it when I was first reading it, and then reading it again. That is exactly what it is. So it's essentially oil. It's the thing that makes gasoline. Everybody in the universe relies on it. It's used for interstellar space travel. Without it, the Spacing Guild can't do jack, and without it, a lot of the groups that have semi-supernatural abilities can't do their supernatural abilities. The Bene Gesserit are kind of lost. The Mentats, while they have their own energy drink speed juice that they create from some plant somewhere, they also use a lot of spice. And everyone that uses spice at all, is a drug, like cocaine style, they sniff it or whatever, or eat it, they gain some mild prescience abilities, unless they're trained to have prescience abilities, and then they become way more involved in that, which is why the Bene Gesserit use it. It's also why the Spacing Guild use it, which is also why our protagonist in the story, that's why he uses it. So, basically, this story follows the events of the changeover from the hands from this planet Dune that has this spice melange, this planet Arrakis that is called Dune by the people, that has a spice melange, a changeover from a sort of wicked house in the Lancerod, which is this group of nobles who essentially rule the universe, along with the Emperor, who essentially rules the universe. It's like a weird political game where the Emperor and the Lancerod are friendly but opposed to each other, and so if Lancerod were ever to unite against the Emperor, then their power, it's a balanced system where their power would equal the Emperor's, if they all teamed up together, but they usually don't, right? But if they were to, then the the emperor would be like out of luck, and he probably wouldn't be able to withstand them. But on the flip side, the emperor basically rules with an iron fist and does whatever the hell he wants, and everyone just kind of follows along unless he does something that is so bad the Lancerod feel that he's going to come after them. So as long as he doesn't do anything that like challenges the Lancerod, then he's probably fine. In this particular story, he has decided that for whatever reason, there's some kind of thing that they never really explore or explain between the Atreides and the Harkonnens. And whatever this is, it seems that the Emperor has decided that the Harkonnens are going to yield their control over the planet Dune, which they have been doing for like 50 years or so, and amassed a whole bunch of fortune because of it. Now they're going to hand over their assets on the planet Arrakis over to the Atreides family, who doesn't seem like they had any real ambition to like be in charge of Dune in the beginning, but they explain why the Duke like accepts this. Like the Duke Leto Atreides is like, I'm accepting this because it will improve my standing in the Lancerod and will improve my Chom profits, which is like this space business that every Lancerod family and the Emperor are part of, as well as the Spacing Guild. So they all get money from it. So basically, everything that happens in the Imperium that makes money, a kickback percentage of that goes to this like big pile called Chom, and then Chom divvies out those things to the rest of the families. So basically, it's in everyone's best interest to trade freely because everyone gets kickbacks from it, right? So that's the idea behind Chom. It's really complicated. There's like this business level and then this like political level. It's sort of like an explanation between like the EU and the European Union, right? Or the European Union and the not the EU, you know what I'm getting at. It's basically this concept of like a financial, but then also a political gathering of people, like the UN and the EU. That's what I was confusing myself about. So it's sort of like that, where there's like a political gathering and there's also like an economic like group, like that kind of thing. So anyway, this changeover is happening between these two houses that hate each other, and there's some sort of reason that they do that, and they have declared, the Lancerod has declared it's okay for Conley, which is some kind of a war of assassins, to be had. So the Harkonnens and the Atreides are not in open combat with each other. They're not attacking each other's planets and trying to blow each other up, but what they are doing is that they're trying to like assassinate each other and poison each other, and that's okay. That's been deemed illegal by the Lancerod and the Emperor, but the Emperor is trying to sort of fix this by handing the Atreides the planet that has gotten the Harkonnens the most money. However, we, the readers, find out that there's also some sort of nefarious underside to that, where the Emperor is actually trying to get rid of House Atreides because Duke Leto Atreides is his cousin, and this whole like business that he has, where he's got a lot of Lancerod people behind him, he's got some heavy influence, scares the Emperor, and so he wants to get rid of his cousin's ability to potentially take over as Emperor, because if he, there's like this whole thing that could happen with that. So he's not just handing over the planet Atreides, or the planet Arrakis to the Atreides. He's doing it in a way so that there can be some kind of return from the Harkonnens that destroy the Atreides family, and therefore they're out of the picture, and the Emperor doesn't have to deal with them anymore. And then the Harkonnens will be placed back in charge because like the spice needs to flow. So we have this like political intrigue going on in the background of the story, and then we follow the protagonist, who is Paul Atreides, son of Duke Leto Atreides, as this changeover is happening. We find out that Paul is this is sort of one of the things that I disliked about the book. Paul is like this kid whose mom is a Bene Gesserit, some secret organization of secret sisters who are trying to do some secret things, which we find out is that they're trying to selectively breed and create what they call the Kwisatz Haderach. And the Kwisatz Haderach is supposed to be some person that has the powers of the Bene Gesserit, but is a male and can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And thus is like, the savior of the universe, as it were. So we find out that Paul's mom, who is a Bene Gesserit, who also is actually the concubine of Duke Leto Atreides and not his wife, has been actually part of this secret plan all along, and then Paul is supposedly supposed to be this Kwisatz Haderach. So we find out that this character that we've just discovered is like really smart and being trained is potentially Kwisatz Haderach. He goes through the trial from the Bene Gesserit sisterhood to find out that he actually survives, which no man has ever survived before, so potentially he is the Kwisatz Haderach. However, there's a weird flaw in that, because near the end of the book we find out that there's another potential Kwisatz Haderach that was around, and that like is a thing. So like technically when they said that no male has ever survived the Bene Gesserit test, it seems like that might have been a lie, because we know that at the end of the book there's another secret potential Kwisatz Haderach in the crowd, and Paul knows it, and the guy knows that Paul knows it, and that he knows that Paul. There's like a whole scene near the end where it's like there could have potentially been another Kwisatz Haderach in the story. This Count Fenring that we hear about a few times, and so it's weird. It's a weird opening to then like have a weird thing near the end. It's very strange. So they lied to him, which is, I guess, not uncommon for the Bene Gesserit. So I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But then the story goes on to tell about how Paul, this potential Kwisatz Haderach, ends up getting like this whole Harkonnen plan to sort of kill the Atreides sort of falls apart. Like it doesn't fall apart. They end up taking back Arrakis, like because of Conley, right? They're taking back over Arrakis, but Paul and his mom escape into the sands of the planet Dune, where they get discovered by Fremen, and they become Fremen, only to find out that Fremen has this, well, they've already known, because it sort of starts off the moment that they land, that the Fremen have this sort of prophecy that one of them will become the Muad'Dib, like one of the Atreides that comes to the planet will become the Muad'Dib, the speaker for the people from the mouth of Shai-Hulud. They have this whole like religion, and they have this idea that potentially it's Paul, that he's potentially the Muad'Dib, and this has a lot to do with the Bene Gesserit's like ability, like thing in the past, where they went about traveling around, sharing their, like, installing certain myths and beliefs into every planet's religion that they could, so that everyone, no matter where they were, no matter what their strange religion was, that the Bene Gesserit sisterhood could be safe if they were ever stranded on those planets or with those peoples. And the Fremen happen to be one of those peoples, and so the Fremen have this idea that Paul Atreides might be the Muad'Dib, and so they when they're like trapped in the planet, and they end up going to the Fremen, and like they end up getting discovered by the Fremen, and they don't die, they end up convincing them that potentially he is the Muad'Dib, and then the more that he does things, the more it becomes clear that he is the Muad'Dib. So he is both the Kwisatz Haderach and the Muad'Dib, and the idea is that that's actually the same person, that it's just the Fremen belief in the Kwisatz Haderach, and he proves it. So the whole story is him slowly realizing and becoming the Kwisatz Haderach / Muad'Dib, and he fights back against the Harkonnens and does a whole bunch of stuff, and eventually at the end of the book, spoiler alert, not spoiler, it's been around for 60 years. If you don't know about it and you haven't seen the movie, then that's your fault. But he eventually beats the Emperor at his own plan and becomes the Emperor by marrying the daughter of the Emperor. And so he becomes like the next in line, and then like also kick the Emperor out because he has the Emperor hostage because he's both the Muad'Dib and the Kwisatz Haderach. And the Bene Gesserit sisterhood also accepts that. There's a few things that go along with this book. There's this whole thing about spice and its prescient abilities and its like thing that's special. And Paul sort of explains the idea that if you could destroy things, because he figures out how you destroy spice, because he can destroy the spice real fast. There's a link between like the sands of the planet and its lack of water and the tremendous amount of spice. He realizes that the two are mutually exclusive. You cannot have water and also have spice. Like the two do not get along. And so he realizes he can destroy all of the spice on the planet if he can create cool weather patterns, right? And so he realizes that he can control spice, and so he uses that to sort of hoard that over the Spacing Guild, which needs the spice in order to do interstellar travel. This point comes out later on in further books where his son Leto II does that very thing. So this story is okay. It's like one of the problems that I have is that there's a little bit of Middle Eastern racism that's in it. There's this idea of like race consciousness in the book that's like a little bit problematic for like the world that we live in now. At the time, I guess it was okay, but it's sort of this idea that like certain races have like certain thought processes and they're different, and they're just dramatically different from each other. And so like their beliefs are weird. It's a weird thing. I don't know too much about it. Like it doesn't really describe it super in depth, but there's this idea that they are different peoples because they have different pasts and consciousness, which is very strange to think. Sort of creates this sort of semi-racism, and then it also like really draws heavily from Arabic culture. So like there's the Fremen are essentially basically Arabic peoples, and they have vast levels of quote unquote spice, which is oil, right? So it sort of has this sort of semi, and they're like a secret people that are doing like secret things, and they don't want to share it with the Western world. Like that's the feel. It's got this whole kind of sort of Lawrence of Arabia kind of pseudo like racism thing, and then like this like quote unquote white savior comes in, right? Like I'm not like a social justice person, but this book does have like some of that is a little bit problematic if that's the thing, but on its outside, like it's actually kind of fun to think of that. But the one problem I have is that our Kwisatz Haderach, our Muad'Dib, our Paul Atreides, is basically a Gary Stew, right? Like he can do anything. Like he fails only because the book wants him to fail. Like they want him to fail a little bit so he can understand what failure looks like. But any other thing he tries to do, he succeeds at it, and that's, to me, kind of boring. I actually quite enjoyed the other aspects of the story where we followed people like Gurney Halleck, and we follow like Baron Harkonnen, and like his dealings with the emperors and stuff. Like I actually like those aspects of the story a lot more than I liked following the Paul storyline. Like the Paul storyline was actually somewhat boring at like large points of it. So the book focuses on like the life of Paul Muad'Dib, but it's I don't know, I didn't like it as much. So for it to be like one of the most influential books in all time, it was surprising to me. But anyway, and when I read it and when I was 26, I actually didn't like it very much at all. When I read it again recently, I discovered that I must have been reading an abridged version because it was actually quite a bit better when I saw these other scenes that I just don't remember, period. And so these other scenes that I don't remember were actually much, much better. So yeah. Now, so I would say that I would give it a 1.5 thumbs, because I would give it both, like it's actually quite good and obviously very influential, and like the world building in it is amazing. So the world building aspect of it is quite good. So I give it at least 1 whole thumb. But then I don't give it a second thumb. Like it was okay to read, but I did get like really bored when it was like on and on and on about Paul being so awesome. Like Paul is so awesome. And I was like, oh, come on. Like, can you just fail once? Like, that'd be nice. Like, just fail a couple times. Like, don't win every battle, you know? Like, let's have him fail a couple of times. Jeez. But there's definitely some cool world building. The like all of the factions, all of the groups that exist in the book, the Mentats, the Suk Doctors, the Bene Gesserits, those were all very cool. They all felt like they were all their own sort of thing that was cool. The Fremen, like they're all special and different, and that aspect of the world building was really cool. Like I really like that, and I really like the idea there's this whole universe out there that like it just felt real, right? Like there was that this was a real thing, which is very cool. So I will give it that. So like I said, I give him a thumbs up and I give him a half a thumb for the other side. I just didn't necessarily like the story of following Paul Muad'Dib. And then from the cliff notes that I read from the future books, I actually probably won't read them because I think that I would probably get really bored. Like there's one where it's basically like, look how cool Paul is. Everyone worships him, but he doesn't want them to. And I'm like, oh, I probably won't read that one. That just sounds really boring. So yeah, so that's what it. So, but I would say that Dune has some influence over, like, I wouldn't say it has influence over me per se, but I did watch the movie, which we're gonna watch for movie night in a couple weeks, and that movie did have some impact on me. David Lynch did a great job of like making it like different, and like so the parts that were really boring kind of made more sense. There's a lot more mysticism with Paul in the movie than there is in the book, and so I kind of like that aspect. But there's also some things that are dumb and stupid, like a lot of that movie is actually pretty bad, but you know, I like the story that the world that Frank Herbert has come up with. So I'm going to give him that. So I would recommend, if you wanted to read it, just read the first one. I guess you could read all the rest of them. I just wasn't, like, I've heard from a lot of people how they were just, their mind was blown and they were super impressed with this book and they couldn't put it down and like everything was wonderful. And I was like, I don't know. I guess maybe if I had read it in 1970, that probably would have been the case. But since I've read it in 2012, when I had all kinds of other things that were like much better, then like I'm not as impressed. But that's just me. But anyway, so that's it for me. This is quite a long video to talk about a book. I usually keep them down under 10 minutes, but I went really long with this one. But yeah, read it if you want to. That's all I got to say about that. So I'll talk to you guys later, and I'll see you on a different video.